Well, welcome everyone to Birmingham Bible Church's Winning Wednesday. That's right, every Wednesday at 12 noon, we are right here. And so we would like to thank each and every one of you for watching, to all of our Facebook users, our Instagrammers, our tweeters, our YouTube subscribers. We would like to welcome you and thank you for watching us on today. You have logged in at the right time to receive some valuable and important information. And so what we like for you to do is we want you to share this broadcast. We want you to share this information with someone that you know. And so we have talked about this subject before, the subject of mental illness. We've talked about it on various events. We've talked about counseling and the need for therapy and why it's needed. But our question for you today is, why won't we get it? And I was thinking I was thinking about this topic, and as we were preparing for Valerie to come on today, when I was growing up, I never heard of anybody getting therapy.
You always heard of, they were actually referred to therapy as going to the crazy house, which is not what it is. I remember people either coming over to my grandmother's house, they're talking with her, or she's going over to their house and talking to them, and you used to talk to your best friend or whoever it is. But a lot of times, we really didn't talk about things that we were going through. And our guest on today has said it before, that we've always heard this term, that whatever goes on in this house stays in this house. You don't spread our business all over the street. But as I get older, I realize that is not always good. And I was actually reading an article the other day, and it was actually post-COVID, and this was way before, November 2019. And these are some stats that I just kind of pulled from this particular article, and it said, in any given year, 1 to 5 employed adults in the U.S. experience a mental issue, meaning, depression, anxiety, insomnia. And then it said that 1 in 4 people will experience a mental health issue in any given year. That means if you're working with 4 people, 1 of y'all are likely to have some type of mental issue. And then it said that kids are not immune either. And 1 in 5 youth between the ages of 13 and 18, and then between the ages of 8 and 15, 13% of those children will experience severe mental health disorder. The last point it makes is that some point in everyone's life, they will experience a mental health crisis or challenge. And these stats are alarming, and I'm sure that after COVID, well, COVID is still here, but I'm sure after COVID hit, those stats probably even went higher, and these are stats before hospitalization, before nationwide deaths, before being cooped up in the house. And so many of us, of course, need to get help, but we are not getting that help. And so our guest on today, Miss Valerie Wilson, she's going to talk about all that. She's going to talk about why certain cultures won't get the help they need. She is a licensed professional counselor of refined mental health wellness. And so we welcome Miss Valerie Wilson on today. Valerie, talk to us, please. Talk to us. What's going on?
Awesome. Well, you did a really awesome job, Lady Pam, going over those stats. And I actually pulled in some of that information as well. But first, I want to thank you and Pastor Mason for having me this morning and trusting me to get this information out there. I am actually going to go ahead and start sharing my screen just to kind of dive into this a little bit. So I did title this Mental Health in the Minority Community, because not only is the Black community affected, but also Asian cultures, Latinos, and other minority cultures, Middle Eastern as well, have certain restrictions around, talking to others outside of the family about issues that we face, or feelings and emotions that we experience. But I'm going to go here to my first slide. And like I mentioned, this stigma, there is a stigma that persists amongst the minority culture, and that's what we're trying to figure out. What is that about? Not until recently have, especially people from the Black community, Black celebrities have been using their platform to tackle the stigma that surrounds Black communities. Taraji P. Henson, First Lady Michelle Obama have come forth, Simone Biles, and so many others have come forth and talked about their experiences with mental health and counseling and therapy and things of that nature. And that is to be commended. However, we do have a long way to go. And I want to dive into what are some of the things that prevent us in the minority community. What are some of our fears? What are some of those things that prevent us from seeking out the help? Just like you mentioned, though, Lady Pam, is that there is a prevalence in the community where 1 in 4 people will struggle with mental health in their lifetime. I think your number was about 1 in 5. But in the Black community, just 1 in 3 African Americans who struggle with mental health issues will ever receive appropriate help. So out of those 3 people, one of them may seek the help that they need. Mental health issues have been compounded by psychological stress that we experience on a day-to-day, just like the average person, but there's also that systemic racism and misdiagnosis that permeates through our culture. And this leads to a distrust in the medical establishment. And so I wanted to go over some of those, that distrust that we experience with the medical establishment. I was actually in my schooling right now, have been studying this a little bit more about why mental health is not sought after by us in the Black community. But first, I want to go over some history here, and it shows that in the U.S. history, where medical schools disproportionately use African Americans in clinical trials and live surgical demonstrations. And we have one of those experiences, the Tuskegee syphilis trial that lasted for 40 years. 40 years, it had gone undercover and resulted in hundreds of deaths. Now, many situations like this have gone still undetected, right? A lot of times we don't really know that this history is out here, but I found a book that I want to recommend, which is the Medical Apartheid, the Dark History of Medical Experimentation on Black Americans for Colonial Times to the Present. They talk more about many other experiences that Blacks had experienced, and it has caused trauma and a just an overall distrust of the medical community, and that does not. With professional counselors, that does not exclude us. That actually include us. There is a study that I have been following by Payon. They actually study 121 professional counselors, students in the field. And amongst these students, they were assessing color blindness, they were assessing white privilege, among other things, to assess what were their attitude towards those things. And then in this particular study, they use a race-based course. They implemented a race-based course to teach them about culture and how to be more sensitive, more empathetic towards people of color. And amongst these students, there was a significant finding that there was unconscious bias towards people of color compared to whites. And this has led to a misdiagnosis, particularly in my field. However, I believe that change is on the horizon. More Blacks are entering into the field. I'll go over some statistics later to show how that number is increasing, how more of the counselors are entering into the field. Across the mental health field, studies have documented the surfacing of racism in cross-racial counseling dyads, and often unconsciously enacted by white clinicians. So this is also a part of that study, and this was one of their findings, is that unconsciously, but I believe also consciously, we sometimes can make these mistakes. And so it just really speaks to how much more growth educationally that needs to be had in order to welcome or include African Americans and other minorities into this medical care. There's also this phenomenon of criminalization amongst African Americans, where we're assigning certain behaviors to just criminal behavior. And oftentimes there is so many different things going on at a mental level that we're not even addressing that. We're trying to correct the behavior without actually diving into finding out what are the thought processes that are contributing to that behavior. So amongst Blacks, we make up about 13% of the adult population, but yet there's 33% of Blacks sentenced to the prison population. While whites represent 61% of the nation's population and only make up 30% of all prisoners. And so it's this particular disparity, one of the disparities that have stoked fear amongst Blacks, and they're seeking out mental health. And oftentimes it's just that their mental health struggles have been met with harsh legal repercussions. We can see this depicted in the news, in the media, where often Blacks any behavior or criminal activity is attributed to just that criminal behavior instead of looking at the mental health side of it. And then we can also see in the media where it's depicted that some whites are it's automatic. Sometimes it's just automatically assigned to their mental health before it's assigned to criminal behavior. So, and then school discipline amongst children, amongst Black children, there's a higher percentage of Black children who receive school discipline than their counterparts. So these are some of the things that are occurring in society and need to be addressed. So some of the cultural messages that we receive, like you mentioned, Lady Pam, what goes on in this house stays in this house. But I also know that often, like when I was growing up, we had this, we had a particular street in our neighborhood called the Block, and we would go down to the block to get haircuts or go to the salon, what have you. And a lot of people were in the salon or in the barbershop talking about some of the things that they were going through with their stylist. So it's not that we're not talking about it altogether. It's just that I think that we're talking about it with people who are not trained in the mental health field. And I think that can be beneficial, but with some of the more serious mental health issues, I think that there is that need just to come alongside a trained individual and get the help that you need. But I also know that that's also because there's not many Blacks in the mental health field. There's about 5% of us that make up the mental health community. So I understand why it would feel more comfortable to go down to the barbershop or go down to the salon and talk to individuals there. I was looking, there was in the news not long ago, a gentleman who was a mental health advocate, and he was going around to barbershops and just really talking to them about the importance of mental health, because he was just aware that this was one of the places that Blacks and other minorities just feel more comfortable with talking. And so he was advocating for mental health activities to kind of come to the barbershop. I'm not exactly sure where that project has gone up to this point, but if that's something that that they can implement in a salon in some way, I don't know. I think that would be useful as well. So one of the mentalities that comes with systemic oppression and chronic racism is that much of the pushback against seeking treatment stems from ideas along the lines, we have survived so much adversity, and now someone is going to say that there is something wrong with us. And I don't think that is the intention, at least from my standpoint as a professional, is not the intention of telling someone that there is something wrong with them. I work from a standpoint of saying there is something on the inside of you that might be lying dormant. And whatever that is that can help you to achieve mental wealth, let's tap into that. Pastor Mason and I had the opportunity to unpack Psalm 42. And some of the things that I was pointing out in that is that the son of Korah was using metacognition, meaning he was checking in with himself. He was asking himself questions, and literally just talking to himself. But in our community, we often see that or label that as something crazy. I always talk to myself or coach myself, but I also know that that's something that I've had to learn that is healthy for me. So in my culture, in my community, that's something that was thought of as crazy, and I had to unlearn that message. We have to unlearn some of these messages that we have been given, especially when they're counterproductive to achieving our mental wealth. In my family, we are a family of leaders, of pastors, and we were trained to see prayer and faith as a sole strategy to overcome mental health issues. But I want to say this is that God did not just give us prayer as a language to have or a conversation to have with him, and faith just to believe in him and not give us strategies. He's given us strategies, just as Psalm 42 has pointed out, but oftentimes we're not using those strategies, and we oftentimes don't think of scripture, or at least unpack scriptures in to find the different strategies. So I can take many of the things that was represented in Psalm 42, the metacognition that was taking place there. There was also thought stopping and thought replacement that was happening there. Those are strategies. And oftentimes we don't think about scripture in that way. But when I think about all of the material that we're given to train us as professionals, I want to filter that through scripture to see if those same things apply through scripture. And those are the things that I put emphasis on. I don't want to be so naive to think that all of the professional manuals and things that we've been taught represents us, represents our culture, because they don't. Majority of it has been written by whites, because that's who makes up, the professionals in the mental health field. But I want to filter that through the word of God and see what he has to say about it, and then pull out those things that are meaningful and weed out those things that are not helpful. So that is my approach to my counseling sessions. So like I said, there is a change on the horizon, like with celebrities who have begun to use their platforms to address mental health issues. And I know that some of you might be familiar with Taraji P. Henson, who established a foundation in honor of her father. And that foundation in 2020 did some particular rounds to cover therapy for over 3,000 people, and for at least 850 participants, of which 45% was new to therapy. 45% were new to therapy, and their goal is to increase that percentage by 20% by next year. I know that oftentimes when I get calls and people reach out to me because they've seen my bio on the website, or they give me a call, especially from the Black community, Asian community, their first question is, they want to know about my background, where I come from, and if I could relate to some of the things that they have gone through. And that is a very valid question, very valid inquiry. And I know that I'm not the only Black therapist out there, and I know that they're far and few between, and it's hard to find them. But I also wanted to provide you with a resource here, an organization created by Dr. Faye Bonner and Tamara Fearby, who created the National African American Counselors Association. In here, they have a directory for Black therapists across many states. And so you can go to this particular link and just search for a Black therapist if that's what you feel most comfortable with. This is not to say that white therapists or any other therapist cannot assist you, but you definitely want to do your research and ask very important and pointed questions about their ability to assist someone of your background. And oftentimes I do ask, would encourage you to ask about multicultural training. Multicultural training just really exhibit or is there to train clinicians in how to be sensitive to cultural issues. And each state, I think most states require that clinicians go through a continuing education course on multicultural to prepare them for the work in the field. So here are some stats for the psychology field, the health service, the Psychology Association reports that the psychology workforce, 88% are white in the field, 12% racial ethnic minorities. And the academic workforce, 81% are white, while 19% are ethnic minorities. But the psychology workforce is becoming more diverse. In 2015, 66% of the early career psychologists were white and 30% were minorities. And then here recently in 2016, 32% of psychology doctorates were earned by ethnic minorities and 68% were awarded to whites. So there is a change on the horizon. I believe more Blacks, more minorities are coming into the field. And I think that is one of the things that as the Black community, they will need to see, like someone that they believe that can relate with some of the cultural issues in the community. I think that if we're going to create further change, that change does need to occur in the home. Like Lady Pam and I have already talked about, oftentimes there are messages about what we do with our thoughts and feelings. If we even attempt to express those things, it's often perceived as a disrespect to our elders. And there's just not a sense of autonomy in the home as well, in my homes within the minority culture. So normalizing the expression of thoughts and feelings and creating a sense of autonomy would be most helpful. If you find yourself carrying over messages from your parents' parenting styles, I would challenge you to ask questions about those. Are those particular parenting styles working for you right now? It might require that we need to unlearn some of those messages that we have been given. One of the things that we encourage in our home amongst our three sons is sitting down at a central location in the home and actually have a moment of transparency. They get to talk about what they think, what they feel, as long as they're doing it in a respectful manner. And I just would encourage that same dialogue amongst your families to have moments of transparency. And some things might be very hurtful to hear in terms of how our children experience us as parents, right? Or how we experience our children. We need to be able to have some dialogue about that and to be able to communicate what it is that we need or what we want or desire in our families, and see if we're willing to accommodate those wants, needs, and desires in our family. But I want to show you a visual of what happens in our communities when we decide that we want to keep hold of our thoughts and our feelings, because sometimes they're judged as weakness. That's an overall message that I have heard in this profession, is that talking about emotions or experiencing emotions is a form of weakness. That cannot be further from the truth. God gave us these thoughts. He gives us feelings. He gives us emotions. Emotions alert us to some things that, kind of like what a fever does in the body, it alerts us to something is not going well in the body. Emotions are there to alert us to there's something just not right. Maybe you're feeling anxious about something. Maybe you're feeling fearful about something. But oftentimes we're reacting to those emotions, reacting with negative behavior, because that would be easy. It would be easier to show some aggression towards those emotions, because aggression is a more acceptable behavior or acceptable emotion, right? But oftentimes we're reacting rather than responding to the information that we're getting about those emotions. So for instance, if you're experiencing anxiety, I am anxious about meeting a new person, right? And so anxiety might, in a negative way, influence us to avoid that person rather than introduce ourselves to that person. Whereas if you collect some information from anxiety and say, hey, I'm really feeling anxious about meeting this person. How do I want to approach that? So you're being honest with yourself and you're creating a plan about how you want to approach it. So one of the visuals that I use often in my session is a box full of candy that I usually keep at my desk, which represents thoughts and feelings, right? So if we are containing thoughts and feelings, and this is our heart or this is our body, and we're containing all of these thoughts and feelings, I want you to imagine what the weight of that would feel like with the thoughts and feelings on the inside compared to those thoughts and feelings having been processed, right? We just process anxiety. I'm feeling anxious about meeting this person. Here's a plan that I can establish, right? You just process that thought. So you trust that this plan, if you follow this plan, it can create some sort of relief. Well, that's what happens when we process our thoughts and emotions. But if we keep it contained, it creates a heaviness on the inside of us. And that also can manifest as fatigue, that can manifest as depression, that can manifest as self-harm. And I say self-harm because oftentimes we get so angry with ourselves for not being able to process our thoughts that we begin to dislike ourselves, or we begin to feel disconnected from ourselves. And when that disconnect happens, we start thinking these horrible thoughts towards ourselves because we weren't able to accomplish the things that we really wanted to do. So I use this box and I say, I ask my clients, I said, well, what if you continue to stuff more in this box, your body, your heart? Then what will happen? Eventually it will spill out. And I think that that's what we're seeing amongst our men and women. Black men is what I'm most concerned about, is that when you're containing all of these emotions and these feelings, and you're not talking to anyone because it feels uncomfortable to you, then how is it manifesting? Because it does. Well, we can think that it doesn't, but it does. It makes us more irritable and agitated. We become short and intolerable of normal day-to-day things. If you notice that about yourself, that is the time to begin talking to yourself, like the son of Korah in Psalms 42. What is going on with you, my soul? Why are you agitated? Why are you irritated? Why are you less intolerant of people in normal day-to-day activities? What's really going on? Those are some questions to ask ourselves. And then the next step, after we have asked ourselves that, we need to start talking about, is there someone that I can talk to? Is there something that I need, want, or desire? And maybe I need to communicate that. Maybe I was not, maybe I felt offended by someone and what they did to me, and I never went to them and talked to them about it. Challenge yourself to do that thing. And listen, For me, I struggled with anxiety. I struggled with depression early in my life. And I have made a commitment to myself to be assertive about the things that I need. And that to me is a lot less riskier than containing those anxious thoughts in my heart or in my body. It's riskier and leads to mental health issues for me to contain it. But when I am assertive, some of the fears that I think is going to happen, for instance, one of the things that I started to practice with, and I started very small and I gradually worked myself up on a hierarchy. So I created this hierarchy of things that made me anxious. One of them was I love McDonald's fries. So I would be anxious about taking some cold fries back or asking for some hot fries. That didn't create as much anxiety as public speaking did. So public speaking was on the higher end of my hierarchy. So I started with those box of fries because that was something that I could handle. I started with introducing myself to people. That's something else that made me anxious, or talking on the phone and making appointments, things like that. Those type of things made me anxious. But when I was not able to do those things and I didn't commit to it, I was often disappointed with myself. And then that disappointment led to negative self-talk. And then that negative self-talk led to depressed mood. So you see the pattern in that? But I decided that, well, I won't be able to tackle public speaking right away, right? But I can start somewhere and I can practice in those things and I can get comfortable in doing those things. And when I feel that I built up some endurance, I can move on to the next and to the next. So I want to go ahead and tell you, yes, it is hard to begin asserting oneself in a space that has created so much anxiety. But challenge yourself, set some small, attainable goals, and challenge yourself to, even if it's confrontation, if it's conflict, challenge yourself to work through some small conflicts and then work your way up to challenging yourself to handle those conflicts that create more anxiety for you. I get very much that it can be difficult to exist in this space where you're expressing thoughts and feelings, but I want to bring you back to the moment of your childhood and any other experiences that you had where you may have been silenced. And I want you to think about, how is that working for you right now? That is my very last question, Lady Pam. How is it working for you right now? And what are you going to do about it?
Wow. Wow, wow, wow. I think everybody on this feed is in a counseling session right now. This was awesome. You brought a lot of good points. And that was one question I had. And I believe you talked about it. I was getting ready to ask, what are some things that people need to notice about themselves that will indicate that they need to see a therapist? And you talked about that being intolerable. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Mm-hmm. You know, the way I remember myself um, is joyful. For the most part, I am a joyful, driven, passionate person, and I know when that change. I know when change has occurred. It is about really seeing or being aware of when when you're intolerable, when you become agitated, when you become impatient. Notice when that shift happens. I'll take you back to Psalm 42. This man knew when a shift had happened for him, and he began asking himself the question, why? And oftentimes we're not checking in with ourselves as to how we're doing. We say things like, this is just the way I am. that's not an excuse. It could, is it the way that you are? Or are there some experiences that you had that caused you to become this person? When I think back on my lifetime, there were experiences like trauma, like rejection, like assault, right? Those things. Maybe there are some people um, who have not known their parents. Maybe there are some other experiences with peers that they have had that have created this hardness against the world. And now there's such a resistance to engage because of a fear of being hurt. And so there are many things that we do to push or sabotage relationships, or push people away or sabotage relationships. So recognizing, doing check-ins, I think would be the best way to become more aware of what's going on for you.
And then what seems to be, I know we were talking about how your caseload has increased, but over your past years, what seems to be, I guess, the most prevalent diagnosis that you've seen among African Americans? What do you think?
I have seen depression. That's number one. Anxiety is another one. And those things there is often an element of self-harm as well.
Okay, this is good. You talked about a lot of stuff, and this whole piece was good. Just the distrust among medical community. I remember when you were talking about Tuskegee, I read an article one time that back in the day that OBGYN doctors would operate on Black women without, anesthesia. And so I think that seemed like a really good, it's just distrust. You don't know. And so you have a lot of African Americans who don't want to, take the vaccine because they don't trust
Right.
the medical community. They don't trust what
For sure.
they say because of all this history of, we're given the wrong medication, we're not told the right thing, we're being used as experiments. The criminal justice system in itself, there are men out there, Black men, who are afraid to be pulled over by cops. And so it's just a lot of just distrust. And so that causes anxiety.
For
And
sure.
I like what you said, that even as parents or as people in general, there's something inside of us that is possibly making us the way that we are. And so what is it? Like you said, talk to yourself. I love that, ask yourself questions. And then, of course, get a therapist. You mentioned a website of how you can locate a therapist. I put it in the chat room so that people can look on their website and find a therapist who's near them, who can relate to them. So all good. I love the coping skills, the strategies that you gave us, unloading your thoughts, talking about those things, and then being assertive, saying, okay, if something is bothering me with that person, if it's our children coming to us and saying, hey, I like that how y'all do the family gathering. What are some things that, you don't like, what are some things we can change, but really having those conversations, because like you said, back in the day, it was, at least in my house, it was, do as I say, you didn't question authority.
Right.
You didn't,
For sure. You didn't have ideas or suggestions.
Right, exactly. This was all good. And so I'm looking, so there's
Yeah.
not any questions in the chat room, but thank you so much for this information.
Yeah. I do want to touch on the part where you talked about surgeries on Black women. It's been a while ago, but I was doing some reading on how OBGYNs were doing hysterectomies on Black women at a disproportionate rate. And I've had to have a hysterectomy, and that was one of the things that just created some fear in me, a healthy fear. But I did my own research. And I asked the doctor about the different tests that he was running. I had him to explain those different tests to me. I also got a second opinion. Another thing that I did was I told him what I thought should happen with my body. And I wanted to ask him, I was like, hey, do you agree with that? Medically, does that make sense, to leave my ovaries? And he said it does. So, you should be doing your own research, and you should be making suggestions to your doctor and see if they medically make sense. And if you're at all, just not comfortable with the feedback that you've gotten, you can always get a second opinion. We have more access to clinical trials now, where we can go in and read them for ourselves. Even with this vaccine, we have access to clinical trials. We have access to the different things that they're putting in these vaccines. So do your research and then make an informed decision.
Yeah, that's good. That is good. Well, thank you, Miss Valerie. I'm going to have a few announcements. You mind stopping your screen for a minute? This was
For
a great
sure.
PowerPoint. This was good. This is awesome. And of course, Pastor Mason believes in therapy. To all of our viewers, he's always said that, we need Jesus and a therapist. And so it is great. I love the fact that Valerie pulled in scripture. She pulled in the Jesus part. And however, you also need a therapist. You need someone who is trained. Like you said, not someone in the beauty shop, in the barber shop. But you're right, and I forgot about that. I would hear women talking about their stuff in the barber shop, I mean the beauty shop. And so you need somebody who's trained. And so we'll go through just a few announcements for today, and then we will let Miss Valerie just kind of give us a conclusion. So if you can give 1 second here. All right. All right. So thank you, everyone, for joining us here on today. You have witnessed, of course, another Winning Wednesday segment. And so our theme for this year for Birmingham Bible Church is the year 2021. It is a year of reconstruction. So make sure you are always reminding yourself of that. And of course, you can see us on all of our social media outlets. We are on YouTube, we're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, and we are on Instagram. Of course, if you would like to get all the notifications and look at all the current events that's going on with Birmingham Bible Church, you can download the App Store. Go in your App Store and download My Sunday app on your phone, and then locate Birmingham Bible Church so that you can see all of the announcements that is going forth as well. And then to receive text messages, you need to text BBCWW to 94253. Text BBCWW to 94253, and you can receive text messages as well. We have a business directory for all of you who want to be a part of that. It is free of charge. If you have a business, you can go to our website, bhambc.org, click on business directory at the bottom, and then key in your information. Your business will go amongst not only our website, but amongst the other 50,000 other businesses that are listed there as well. So make sure you take a part of that as you go through our website. Of course, every Tuesday at 11 o'clock a.m. Central Standard Time, we have a study in the scriptures with Dr. James H. Mason III. We are walking through the book of Philippians, and what a mighty study that we are having. So make sure you set your clocks and set your alarms as a reminder that every Tuesday at 11 a.m. we have a study in the scriptures. And then today you've heard from Miss Valerie Wilson. She talked about why counseling is taboo in certain cultures. Please go back and listen to all of the segments that we had this month and the previous month. They stay out there forever. And so you want to go back and look at that and share this information with somebody. Don't keep it all to yourself. And then every Saturday at 10 a.m., we have our small groups. We are talking about taming your tongue, 30 days to taming your tongue. And so we are excited about all that information. If you have not been on it before, make sure you contact me. You can email me at ladypam@tcowi.org. And then every Sunday at 11 o'clock a.m., we are walking through the book of Psalms. It's a summer in the Psalms. Pastor gets a different psalm to preach about. And so, of course, you don't want to miss part 2 this Sunday. So make sure you are looking at that and you are logged in this Sunday at 11 o'clock a.m. Also, our children meet at 9:45 via Zoom. So if you need that information, y'all know what to do. Email me at ladypam@tcowi.org. Our prayer call is every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 6 a.m. That number is 515-604-9324, and the access code is 381179. Thank you for your continuous gifts and your continued prayers for our 11 Compassion International children. Yes, we have 11 sponsored children, and continue to pray for the country of Haiti. As you know, they've been going through some horrific times with the earthquake, and they had a tropical storm that came through there. So continue to be in prayer from them. We will have more information about them and their status as they continue to reach out to us and give us updates through Compassion International. So of course, your gifts and your donations go towards food, medical supplies, their counseling that they need, emotional counseling they need, their educational needs, and their physical growth. And just thank you for your continuous donations to Our Land, Our Future. Believing God that we'll continue to do ministry debt-free. And so we're still believing God that He will continue to give us all that we have here in Birmingham as we continue to build for His kingdom. Of course, we need each and every one of y'all to reach somebody and tell somebody of all these events, everything that we have going on. We got some amazing things that's coming up later on this year. So just make sure you share the word on that. And so as always, have an awesome week. And so, Miss Ballard, just want to thank you again for coming on this live and just really giving us some great information. Please tell us how people can contact you, because you are a great therapist. I've heard great things about you from other people that we've referred to you. And so please tell us, she's actually out of Arizona, y'all. So she's not even in Birmingham. She's doing a lot of virtual things. And so tell us how people can contact you.
Yeah, you can reach me at 480-455-7742, or you can email me at valerielpc@refinedmindshealth.com. I also have a website out there, refinedmindshealth.com. You can reach me on at any of those avenues, and I look forward to hearing from you.
Yes, ma'am. Well, thank you so much. We appreciate this. And everybody, as we like to say, make sure you stay safe, you stay sane, and you stay sanitized. Y'all be safe out there. Thank you, Miss Valerie.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.